Listen. All right. Is it
There it
sharing?
is.
Beautiful.
Perfect. And guess what I'm
I
going to do?
mean,
I'm taking it back from you, but just leave that up so when we pop it to you, we'll all be in great shape.
We're gonna see
excellent.
him. We're gonna see him, right?
We'll see him. Well, I don't know if we can see him or not.
Just has to click on my screen.
Yep.
So can you see me, Cece?
I cannot see you.
Oh, really? Okay. So Mike has complete control.
Well, it's not what I'm
As
trying to do.
usual.
It's just working out that way.
No, no problem. No problem. As long as you know what you're doing and we're heading the right direction, that's what matters.
Yeah, well, we're hoping for the best. And hopefully right now you're seeing my second monitor screen. Is that what you're seeing, CC?
I see the sponsor slide.
Perfect. Who's got the puppy in the background? Is that
That's my dog Dundee.
gotta love him? Gotta love him. So Dr. Murphy, it seems to be I asked this question to most of the speakers. You're stranded on a desert island. What album are you going to bring with you?
Oh, I can bring an album.
An
Oh,
album.
goodness.
What?
Well, there's a lot of choices. I don't want to just bring one. I'd like to at least have a handful.
That wasn't an option. It was.
I know. I know. I'm trying to break the rules already.
We've already decided that today at our.
Yeah, I would say I was guessing that it was at least the 80s. It might have gone back to the 70s, and apparently it does.
Yeah. I actually sing some of the Meatloaf songs. I learned from singing along with an 8-track. So I actually fade out, say the word click, and then fade back in when I'm singing the song. The old 8-tracks, they had that fade out.
Oh yeah. It had a switch. Yeah. I remember that old 8-tracks. They didn't last for very long.
No. You ended up pulling them out of your dashboard on your car in utter disgust.
Yeah, they would kind of get magnetized and get wrapped up inside, and oh, they were a mess. Cassette tapes were a little better, but they had that same problem, just not as bad.
Yeah, but I got good at fixing those. At least you could get a big pen in the end of it and
Yeah,
try to squeeze it back in there. But
absolutely.
once they were gone, they were gone.
Yeah, I don't know if I even have any of those laying around the house anymore. I might have thrown all my cassette tapes away finally.
Yeah, I don't have any cassettes or anything left. What do you need it for? You have Spotify.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just that sentimental thing. These were your favorite cassette tapes for all time. It's like I don't really want to throw it away because of the sentimental value.
I get it. And when you're wooing a woman, how do you make a mixtape now? I don't know how to do that.
Got to do a playlist. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Not that I know how to do that very well, but
if there's anyone here that was born after 1990, if you could show me how to make a playlist, call me later. I'd really appreciate it. Oh, unbelievable. We've got so far here 42 people. If you don't mind, Dr. Murphy, I'm going to hold off for about another 2 minutes before we begin festivities.
Not a problem, Mike. Not a problem.
And you still haven't given me the name of the album.
Well, I'm trying to decide which one I want to give you. I mean, there's a few. I could just call out the last one I listened to, which was Supertramp, but that was the last album I listened to. Well, actually, I was wrong. There's a guitarist I listened to, Leo Kottke. That was the last album I listened to.
I have no idea who that is.
Yeah, most people don't know. He's one of these solo guitarists. Plays, 6 and 12 string acoustic.
Nice.
Sounds
Nice.
like it sounds like at least two people are playing when he plays. That's how good he is.
Oh wow. Yeah, I have no musical talent.
I
Obviously
have.
I can't sing.
Well,
Can't,
you sing better. You sing better than I do. I can tell you that.
I guess that's not a glowing review, but I'll take it. I will take it. Jeff Weld says he knows Leo.
Does he?
Leo fan.
Yeah. No, he's a great guitarist. If you like acoustic guitar, I'd recommend him to anybody to listen to him because he's really good. I could never play like that. I don't play a guitar, but I love listening to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to shut off my camera so we can begin. And so, first and foremost, I'd like to say welcome to the NJTA webinar series. We're glad to have you. My name is Mike Reed. I'm going to be your host for tonight. I'd like to start off just by thanking our sponsors. We're thrilled and overwhelmed with their support. Without their support, we could not be hosting these webinar series free of charge because it does cost money to have this type of a platform. So we feel really very lucky. So I'd like to thank them. Tonight, all your microphones will be muted during the webinar. It's not because we're mean. It's just that if we unmute them, we get a lot of background noise that will interrupt the presentation. So we shut it down during. At the end, we will allow you to ask questions. You can actually even ask questions during the presentation, but do us a favor, submit it to the chat box. You submit it to the chat box. At the end of the presentation, we'll ask Dr. Murphy all the questions that are in the chat box. Now, I am a technical wizard, just so you know. And so if you have any technical problems during the session, I will tell you to fix it, log off, and sign back in using the link that you previously were given. That seems to clear up any problems. Now, during tonight's class, there are going to be 4 pop-up quizzes. We have to give the quizzes in order to validate the fact that you were here and listening. And so with that said, we're going to just share one right now with you, just so you know what they look like. I'm going to launch it real quick. And so you should be seeing a test in front of you, and it says, are you a member of the New Jersey Turfgrass Association? So this is real simple. You click A for yes or B for no. So everyone, just answer that question, please.
I got it correct, Mike.
Did you get it correct? Are you sure?
I got it correct. I got 100% on that one.
Nice. Very nice. And so we only have 83% submitted. Up 86. We're moving right along. And by the way, guys, you're only going to get a minute to do this on all future quizzes. So I'm just going to close this up right now. Review it. Let's see. 63% are members of the association, which means that 37% aren't. Well, guys, guess here comes the sample for you. Hey, if you're not a member of the New Jersey Turfgrass Association, the question is why? We have a bunch of great opportunities for you, from Turf Expo to field days. The New Jersey Turfgrass Association is proud to support Rutgers University, and we do our best to help them find the monies they need to do things, like irrigation system. Did we help out with an irrigation system at the university, Dr. Murphy?
Yes, you did. It was very essential, and we
And,
greatly appreciate it.
and so your membership fees, your attendance, all help us provide things that are necessary for the university, for the turf grass division of it. So if you're not a member, hey, come out and join us. So 4 quizzes, not pass or fail, but you got to take them in order to get your CEUs. Now, guys, in order to make sure that you were here, we need a photo of you holding your driver's license, and we need you to email it to exec director at newjerseyturfgrass.org. In the subject line, put the name of the speaker and the date of the webinar. And in the body of the email, write your date of birth and your ProFact license. So this is a time you should take out your camera and take a picture of this before we move on. All right, going once, going twice, we're going to move on here. Well, right now, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Jim Murphy. He leads the outreach program and produces extension materials. This meets the needs of the diverse clientele with timely research-based education. His research programs complement his extension activities regarding best management practices for turfgrass systems, with a focus on plant and soil interactions. Ladies and gentlemen, without no further ado, I'm going to change the presentation and hand it over to Dr. Murphy. You should see it right now. Is it there?
Good. I think so. I clicked the button.
And away you go.
Should I have my webcam on or not, Mike?
I think people like to see it.
Okay, I don't know if it's on. It looks like it's off on from my point of view. It looks like my webcam is off. I've clicked the button, but it does not appear to turn on. I don't know that I have control of it.
I don't know, but that's okay. You can go on without it.
Okay, very good. Well, let me get my control screen up for PowerPoint so that I can control the slides. And as Mike mentioned, we'll be talking about fertilizer programming. And before I get into that, though, I want to talk about the, why is this not advancing? There we go. So the question is, are you certified? And are you on the public list if you're a professional applicator for fertilizers? And if you are certified and you haven't checked whether or not you're on the public list, you need to, because if you're not on that public list and you are certified, you have to activate your account. We've tried to communicate this through emails from ProFact out to people who are certified to let them know that to make this switch over to the new website, it's an active process. I cannot move people's data over for them. We have to have the users log in, register, and that process will move your old information out of the old database into the new database. It's not terribly complicated. But it's important because if you all remember the law requires that there be a public list of all certified and trained fertilizer applicators. And until you activate your account on the new website, you won't actually be on the public list. And we don't want anybody to get into trouble after March 1st, making applications and not being publicly listed. And that's one of the easiest things that someone could check to look for compliance. And we certainly don't want people to be fined for non-compliance when they actually are, other than the fact that they haven't been put on the public list. So to do that, you go to profact.rutgers.edu. And I want to walk you through this a little bit. This is the new look to the website. It's not terribly different from the old website, but it is different. And more importantly, it functions a lot better than the old website. So this is the front page, and this button right here, register, is what you would want to click on to do the registration process. And I should point out before I go too much farther, these slides that I'm showing you, I have those captured in a PDF file. that Mike Reed can share with everybody. Maybe Mike already has, but if not, he can, so that you have a PDF at your disposal to look at. So you don't have to be overly concerned if you don't follow completely. At least follow well enough so that you recognize what you have to do when you actually sit down to do this. And just to emphasize the fact that we can track who's activated their accounts. We have over 2,000 certified applicators in the list and the old website, and only about 900 have activated their accounts. So we have more than half the population to move over, and it's important that we do that again for compliance reasons. So anyway, again, this is the front page when you log in through your browser, and this register button is what you want to click to get going. So here's the steps. I'll show you the slides here, but again, as I just said, you click on register and that gray navigation banner at the top of the page. It's going to send you to a registration form to fill out. And if you are a certified person in the old database, there's going to be a checkoff box that I'll show you that says, I am from the old Profact rut.rutgers.edu site. If you're not and you're new, don't click that box because it's not going to work for you. This is just for those people who are in the system in the old database and are trying to move the information from the old into the new. You need to know your username in that old database. This is going to go away in the new website, but in the old website, there was a username. We're going to get rid of that and replace it with your email address. And then the ID here is your certification number. So hopefully you have that information. Don't worry if you don't. You can call in, and I'll give you the phone number here in another slide to call in and talk to Barbara Connors about getting your username as well as your ID information if you've lost track of that. Once you've filled out that form, down at the bottom is another register button to confirm your data entry. Before you hit that register button, confirm your data entry, make sure it's correct, then click register. And then that sends you into another screen, and there will be a portal option and then a dashboard option, and I'll explain a little bit more about what that means. But those clicks will send you to your information so you can see your status as a certified fertilizer applicator. So this is text form. I'm going to show it to you pictorially, showing you screenshots from a computer, what this looks like, so that it's not so foreign to you when you get into it. So this is that page that I showed you early on. Click this register button to get going. And then once you click that, it sends you to this form. Now I've kind of expanded it so you can see the entire form. And so you're not going to be able to read all this text. These are instructions up here. But this is the registration form starting here and going down through this. And this is that box that I mentioned that you should click if you are currently certified and in the old database. And it just tells the software to go to the old database and pull your information on credits and payments and all that kind of stuff over into the new database. You still need to fill out this material, name, address, business, company, etc. And then here's the register button down at the bottom of the page to then submit this form and start the process. And then if you are clicking this button up here, this box for I am from the old Profact website, that'll prompt the system to request your username from the old website as well as your ID, which is your certification number or license number, however you want to refer to it. So once you give that information, your username and license number, this is what will show up, and it'll basically be your dashboard. Your name should be up here underneath dashboard. And then these kinds of things, these are check boxes that indicate whether or not you've done the training to take the exam. This is a checkbox for that you've paid for the exam, and this is a checkbox for that you've passed the exam. In this view, none of these have been done, so it's all red X's, so none of these are complete. And then another way to view your information on this dashboard is down at the bottom. These little grayed out boxes mean these steps are not available to this Jane Doe in this mockup because Jane Doe has not taken the training guide. So this blue kind of highlighted button means you need to go take care of your training. And these are things that'll come up as you complete tasks. This is the button to click if you want to update your profile. Say you changed businesses, you've changed addresses, you want to change your password, things like that. You would click on this to update your information. So this is sort of meant to be designed to kind of be a prompt for you what you need to do. And since these are all grayed out, these are not options to Jane Doe in this example because she hasn't even taken the training yet. Hopefully that makes some sense to you. So if you click on training to do training, those of you that done this years ago might recognize this. This sends you the training information. And the way this is going to look is, whoops, I didn't want to do that. Each time you go through one of these sections and read it, you get a check mark indicating you've completed your training. And then there's 5 modules in this, and I'm not going to scroll down and show you the bottom of it. But as you go through it, it marks off that you've viewed the information, and you go on to the next section. So once you complete your training, this is what the dashboard will look like. This says Ellen example in this case, so this is a new person, but this is a green checkbox now, meaning that you've done it, and now payment becomes an option down here in the task list, and you can click on that to go to the payment page. And this is the payment page, and you click here so that you are paying for the exam to take the exam. So this would be for new people coming into the system. And then once you click that, it sends you to this payment portal for billing, where you're allowed to put in your billing information, credit card information, etc. So pretty straightforward there. And then you should get an acknowledgement once your payment is complete. You should see a receipt kind of box. If you see any errors in the payment process, please let us know. Here's the contact information and the phone number, and there's also an email address. It gives you your confirmation number for this transaction, etc. So if you go back to the dashboard, obviously this after the payment, this turns green. And onto the exam, this button becomes active so that you can take the exam, and that's what you would have clicked to do that. So once you've got all those steps processed, for those of you who've done the exam and paid for it and all that kind of stuff, when you transfer your account over into the new website, you should get 3 green check boxes here. And then that would allow you to get your certificate. View your public certificate on the public list, which I'll show you in a little bit. It also gives you access to some, or this is the task list again for what you can do. You should be able to add TFAs or train fertilizer applicators if you want to with this button. Those of you who don't have TFAs, don't worry about it. In this particular account, there are no TFAs, but if there were, down here at the bottom where you see these column headings, TFAs from previous years would show up here so that you can either add them and activate them for this year or delete them from the list, etc. So this is the public list. This has been updated to be sortable. If you remember the old list, it was just a static list, and you had to scroll from top to bottom to find anybody. But now, if you look at these little arrow buttons, this list is sortable by city, it's sortable by company, sortable by last name. And if you want to see an account, these are hot link buttons that send you to more detailed information about that person. But this is what I was talking about at the beginning of tonight's talk. This is the public list, and this is required by law that we maintain a public list of all the certified fertilizer applicators. so that if somebody in your township or in an area where you're doing business wants to confirm that you are certified, you can either show it to them on the list or they can look it up. And so there's also pages of people at this point. When I made this screenshot, there were 18 pages. And I think the last time I looked, there's up to 25 pages now. And as I mentioned, we have over 900 people now that have reactivated their account in the new website. So it's gradually increasing, and we'd love that to be 100%, hopefully by March 1st, so that people don't get themselves in non-compliance situation. So I should point out there is also a trained fertilizer applicator page. That's if you click this button here, especially if you click this arrow, it'll give you 3 options. And what I want to remind everybody, we have provided a number of training materials for trained fertilizer applicators, both in English and in Spanish. So if you want some material to help train your TFAs, if you're a certified applicator, you're allowed to train your own people. You can certainly send them off to a meeting and get them trained at a meeting if you want, but it's allowable by law to train them yourself. And if you need material to help train, there's PowerPoint slideshows, printable versions of PDFs, both in English and in Spanish. And so these are the instructions. And there's also a TFA list that I'm not going to take the time to show you. But you find that TFA list under this trained applicators button in the gray navigation bar at the top of the page. Okay, I'm not going to go into any more detail other than that. This is really just trying to encourage people to make sure they get their account transferred over to the new website. If you have any questions, this is our contact information. This is the phone number. This is the email address. Those of you who have called in before or emailed know that a woman by the name of Barbara Connors answers that phone and the email, and she can help you navigate through this if you're having any problems. We don't want the technology be the stumbling block, so please call if you're having issues. So far, we've not run into any major glitches. They've all been minor and fairly easy to fix, which is a good thing. And we want to make sure everybody gets through this process with the least pain possible. So please call in if you're having any issues or email.
Yeah, Dr. Murphy, I was able to upload that document. I'm going to launch it right now.
Okay.
I think I'm going to launch it right now. No, I'm not.
Sure.
Now it's actually going to be emailed to everyone at the end of the presentation. So
Okay.
You have control. I can't open it up right now, but I'll do it.
Do you want me to give you back control, Mike?
Nope, you keep going. You keep going.
Sure? Yeah, I'm not. That's not a problem if you want to.
Nope.
Okay. Well, so that's the ProFac side of this talk, and what I'd like to spend the next 20 minutes or so is talk about best management practices. And I want to remind everybody that we have a bulletin on that. This is our Cooperative Extension webpage for publications. So if you type in this E327 Rutgers turf or best management practices or something like that, it's likely to come up very early on in whether you use Bing or Google or any other search engine to find this publication. And it'll send you this page. You just hit the download PDF if you want to download it for your records. But this is what the front page of that bulletin looks like. And many of you have probably seen me talk about this before, but it's a summary of all the various options you have as a manager of landscapes to manage nutrients in a way that is not only good for plants, but hopefully good for your business as well as good for water quality. And the message here is if you know how to fertilize for the health and vigor of plants, and you follow some basic guidelines, this should greatly reduce any risk to water quality. And so it's written in a fairly straightforward, simple way, a lot of bullet points. There's not a lot of long, complicated explanations here. So we try to keep it straightforward as possible, and I encourage you to look through this from time to time to remind yourself of all the various options you have. This isn't meant to be a cookbook. It's meant to be a series of options of, hey, if you're in this situation, these are things you can do to make sure you're applying nutrients properly for the benefit of the plants you're managing as well as water quality. And it's trying to get you to think of all those things that you can utilize. There is a big table in there that kind of outlines how you might go about applying fertilizer, especially nitrogen, throughout the growing season. And so this table looks a little complicated, but it tries to summarize various numbers of conditions, irrigated clippings removed, irrigated clippings not removed, not irrigated clippings not removed, zoysia grass, sports turf, golf courses. And it's meant to be pretty broad and gives you a lot of ranges at different times of the year on how much to apply. And then you'll see there's these like brackets and there's parentheses. And these are all footnote things that try to explain the detail of, well, you want to apply 2 pounds of N during the period of mid-August to mid-September. How do you apply 2 pounds? If you know the law, you can't apply 2 pounds at once. You have to do it in at least 2 single applications of 1 pound each or more at a lower quantity. And so that's what all these footnotes are about. It's trying to explain all the various things that you want to think about that are outlined in this table here. And I'm not going to read through this for you. You're certainly welcome to look at this and study it on your own time because everybody's situation is different. And that's what this information is trying to reflect is there's a lot of different ways to fertilize turf correctly. It all depends on your circumstances, and that's what's behind BMPs. It's not a cookbook formula like do A, B, C, D only. It's like, well, if you're trying to do step A, there might be more than one. Maybe there's 2 or 3 ways to do it. They're all acceptable, and these are the conditions you might want to do. The first option under A, these are the conditions you may want to do the second option under A, and here's another set of conditions that apply to the third option under the A step, if that makes sense. So breath management practices are not formulaic. They are outlining principles and guidelines and are trying to help you figure out what decision fits your situation the best. So let's talk a little bit more detail about nutrient management. Essentially, what you need to recognize is, as a general rule with nutrients, there will always be at least one nutrient that is the most limiting nutrient that controls growth, controls the vigor and health of the turf or whatever plant species you're managing. And this barrel on the left is trying to illustrate that in this scenario, what's limiting growth is the phosphorus nutrient. And so you can apply as much nitrogen as you want. If phosphorus is too limiting, this nitrogen is going to have minimal impact because it's phosphorus that's limiting the growth and health of the turf. Over here on the right, it's a little bit different scenario. What this is trying to illustrate is phosphorus is okay, and what's limiting growth is nitrogen. And that in this scenario, if you wanted more growth or needed more growth, maybe you don't need more growth, but if you wanted more, you would need to apply nitrogen to get it. And so that's what's called sufficiency level kind of approach, understanding what's the most limiting situation. You can see you can have other things like light and heat could be controlling growth. In this picture, that's not the case. But there are other things that actually can be, water for what could be very limiting. And it doesn't matter how much nitrogen you apply. If water is limiting, you're just not going to get a growth response to that application. So I'm going to focus on nitrogen for the time we have the rest of the evening here. Nitrogen is the most critical nutrient you can apply that controls turf vigor and quality. It's often the most limiting. Most other nutrients are going to be adequate for growth, and what's going to be holding the grass back the most, at least from the standpoint of soil fertility, will be nitrogen. It's the nutrient that is required in the greatest quantity inside the plant. And I think I have a laser pointer, don't I, Mike?
Yep, you do.
I'm going to see if I can click that on so that's kind of small. Can I make that bigger?
Uh, I don't know. I'm
There it
not.
is. Yep. I clicked the pen, not the laser. So, sorry. Thanks, Mike. I just had to read the buttons better. In nitrogen in the plant will be as much as 5% dry weight basis, which is high, very high. No other nutrient is contained at the same quantity as nitrogen in the plant. The next closest would probably be potassium. So it is the nutrient that the plant needs the most of. Now, that doesn't mean you should be over fertilizing. By all means, you don't want to do that, but it will be typically the most limiting nutrient in the growth of turf. And excessive quantities, we want to avoid that because essentially with excessive quantities, you are running the risk of producing nothing but a bunch of hay. And this is something you want to avoid doing because this will be really stressful on the grass. If you're mowing and producing a bunch of clippings, you're scalping the grass because it's over fertilized. That is not good. So as a general rule of thumb with nitrogen in your programs, you probably want to err on the low side. Now, if you recognize the turf as desperately weak and really needs a lot of nitrogen, that's one thing. But under fairly well established turf conditions that are in reasonably good shape, you're much better off erring on the low side of an application versus an excessive side. Because if it's too low, you just can correct that the next time you make a visit to the property or the next week you go out on your sports field and add a little bit more if you realize the last application was a little bit weak. And the flip side to that is excessive applications can take weeks, sometimes months to be depleted from the system. If you really make an excessive application that's way off target, it's not going to go away in a matter of days or weeks. It'll take months to get rid of the effects of that excess of nitrogen. Indicators of low nitrogen in turf are what we call chlorosis. And this is a term used to describe mottled yellow-green leaf color. Shoot growth is going to be very slow. If you have any traffic or any kind of damage to the turf, if it's well fertilized, it should grow out of that reasonably quickly. I'm not saying in a matter of day or two, but certainly within a couple weeks, there should be some recovery. And if you're not getting that recovery, that's a sign that perhaps there's not enough nitrogen in the system. If the turf is actually going backwards and it's losing shoot density and everything else is okay, it's got enough water, enough light, there's no disease, that's a sign that you probably need more nitrogen. And there are some diseases that are favored by low nitrogen. Leaf rust, stem rust, those are both more aggressive under low nitrogen. Dollar spot is more aggressive under low nitrogen. Anthracnose is much more aggressive under low nitrogen, and so is red thread. This is not a license. If you get these diseases, that's not a license to over fertilize, but it does indicate you probably could have more nitrogen in the system and be helpful, at least as it pertains to the disease. So excess nitrogen, there are three major diseases you've got to watch out for at higher nitrogen fertility programs. That would be brown patch, Pythium blight, and summer patch. And these three are all typically summer problems. So you won't see them in the spring. You won't see them in the fall so much, but you are going to see them in the summer months, June, July, August. Those are the period, that's the period of the year you might see these diseases, and they will be more severe under higher nitrogen fertility. You're going to get more shoot growth with excessive nitrogen and much less root growth, and that makes the grass more sensitive to drought. Tends to lower the carbohydrate reserves or the food reserves that are stored inside the plant. And so the plant is not as resilient. If it gets into stress, it doesn't have enough energy necessarily to come out of it. And if you're fighting a weed by the name of annual bluegrass or Poa annua, and you don't want this grass, higher nitrogen is going to help it survive, help it spread, and become more dominant in the landscape. Now, a lot of golf courses, especially on putting greens, don't mind having annual bluegrass in their putting greens, but it's not a very good lawn grass. In fact, it's quite terrible as a lawn grass. It'll look okay probably in the early spring and in the cool periods of fall, but in the summertime, it's very prone to a lot of diseases as well as insects. There's a very difficult problem with nitrogen in it that we don't have a good soil test recommendation process. We can test for nitrogen in the soil, but nitrogen is very dynamic. It changes in a matter of hours. It can go from one form to another and change into a third form in a very short period of time. So while you can take a test, by the time you interpreted the results and come up with a recommendation, the recommendation may not be accurate anymore because things have changed. And as a result, we typically base nitrogen on things like the condition of the turf. What's its vigor? What's its density? How is it growing? And also you have to consider its use, its function. Is it a sports turf? Is it a lawn? Is it a utility turf where no one really cares what it looks like, just as long as there's something there? All those factors enter into deciding how much fertilizer to apply. And one thing you have to resist the temptation to do is use dark green color as your gauge, because you can certainly fertilize and make turf really dark green color, but I can guarantee you that turf is going to have very weak rooting. It's going to be more susceptible to diseases like brown patch, pythium, and summer patch, and you're not going to have as good a summer stress tolerance if you're fertilizing very aggressively. So factors to consider: the species of grass, cultivar can also play a role, what age, and if you've been in the business very long, you may understand age quite well with your experience. And just think about it. If you have properties that you've maintained where the turf is 2, 3, 4 years old, compared to a turf that is 60, 70, 80 years old, the amount of fertility you have to put on that 2-year-old turf compared to 80-year-old turf is really different. The 80-year-old turf, as long as it's reasonably good shape, it just takes a little touch up with nitrogen fertilizer. Whereas the 2-year-old turf, it may take twice the amount to get the kind of response you're looking for. So age is really important, and really the reason for that is the organic matter in that old turf has built up over 80 years and is helping to sustain the fertility that's there. And the nutrients that are in the system are essentially recycling themselves. They get into the plant, you mow the grass, the leaves fall on the ground, the leaves rot away, return the nutrients back into the turf soil system. The turf grass takes those nutrients back up. And so it just continually recycles. There are some losses, and that's why you do occasionally need to apply a little bit more nutrient. But if it's a very old, mature turf, all that organic matter keeps the losses to a minimum compared to a brand new turf. We talked about function in a previous slide, how the grass is being used, what its condition is, but other factors like soil texture, organic matter, soil test information, irrigation, clipping removal, budget, experience, these all enter into decisions about how to program fertilizers. So let's talk about frequency of fertilization. And again, there's multiple ways of applying fertilizer. It doesn't really matter how many times you do it. What matters is you understand what you're doing if you're applying fertilizer once versus 3 times versus 6 times. And this slide kind of summarizes what you really have to understand. Ideally, all plants are going to want their nutrients just like we have. Every day we're eating 3 meals a day, roughly, right? And so we're gradually bringing in nutrients throughout the day, and we're steadily feeding ourselves. Plants want the same thing from the soil in terms of nutrients. So if you're having to apply nutrients like nitrogen, ideally, applying a dose every week or two is great. You would want to do it in micro doses, really small quantities. Nothing, no single application is very large. And then you would just adjust the rates up or down based on how the turf is responding. If you're not putting out enough, you increase it. If the turf is growing really well, then you back off and you reduce the amounts. The problem with this approach is it's very expensive. If you're going to make 10, 12, 15 applications a year, that's pretty expensive. And so only the highest value turf gets treated like this. So the classic example are golf course putting greens. They will be fertilized as much as once every week or two, but with very small micro doses. And then the opposite extreme is to apply all your nutrients once a year. And that's something that fertilizer manufacturers have attempted to develop for years. And in turf, it kind of works, but it depends on how high a quality turf you want. And for really high quality turf, these fertilizer products that are meant to be once or twice a year applications are usually not quite good enough under really high quality demands. Now, for lower quality demands like a lawn setting or a utility turf setting, the once a year approach can work if that quality level is acceptable to you. Obviously, this conserves a lot of labor. It minimizes the equipment, simplifies storage and handling. And so it's the opposite extreme. And then there's all kinds of things that you can do in the middle. If you're going to apply once a year, though, one thing that you have to keep in mind is you're probably going to need a special type of fertilizer to not have that nitrogen be lost or create too much growth in a short period of time. So with infrequent applications, you're applying larger quantities. And for nitrogen, you really need to be using at least some amount of slow-release fertilizer. Products such as urea form, methylene urea, sulfur-coated urea, and natural organic materials are just some classic examples. There are others, but these are some of the biggies. And ultimately, the absence and presence of a nutrient determine what the frequency really ought to be. But if you're only going to apply it a few times a year versus many times a year, slow release is something you've got to give some consideration to. The amount of the rate of nitrogen that you're going to apply depends on the carrier. We just talked about slow release versus quick release. And if you're applying large quantities, you're going to definitely want to have slow release. Temperature, you can get away with a lot of things when it's cool, but when it's warm or hot, you've got to be very careful about your rate. The time of year is related to temperature. Mowing height plays into this, especially with really low mowing height. You can actually pick up fertilizer granules with the mowing, and so you got to use smaller pellets that infiltrate down into the turf and soil quickly. And then turf grass species and cultivar. You're not going to fertilize creeping bentgrass on a golf course the same way you do tall fescue in a lawn. All right, here's the temperature guidelines. Once you start getting upwards about 85 is sort of where you have to start changing your mindset about the type of products you're using from the standpoint of temperature anyway. And so once you're below 85, especially if you're in the 60s and 70s, you can be pretty aggressive with your fertility input because it's not going to burn as bad, if at all. And you can use fairly large quantities of water-soluble nitrogen. Now, once you start getting above 7/10 in New Jersey, the law says you have to start including slow release with your product. But you can use fairly high rates if you want to. You don't have to. You can do multiple low application rates, but if you're going to be making these higher application rates, you want to make sure it's reasonably cool or mild and not hot. So once it gets over 85 degrees, you really need to get the fertilizer rate down. I'd say no more than a half a pound, maybe less in certain situations. And that would be in the water-soluble component. You could put higher amounts out under high temperatures, but you better have a lot of slow release in there. Otherwise, you have a great risk of burning the grass because it's just too hot, and you're going to get too much growth, and it's too salty under that kind of temperature if it's water-soluble. With low mowing heights, you can apply low rates of water soluble because that dissolves quickly. It gets into the soil, it gets away from the surface. But if you're applying granular slow release, you've got to get a small prill size or a low SGN, something like an 80, certainly nothing more than 100 is what you would want to use like on a putting green or a golf course tee. But if you're in lawns, you can go as high as 200 um, because that there's a lot of canopy there for that particle to fall into. You tend to get a more uniform response with smaller particles, but obviously smaller particles are generally going to be more expensive, so it's a more pricey product. And we talked about 7/10 being a limit for water soluble, and above that you have to include slowly available. Go ahead, Mike.
Quick question for you.
Sure.
There seems to be some confusion in our industry about slow release products versus stabilized products. And do stabilized products count as slow release when people are buying bag materials?
Yeah, great question, Mike. And that's a confusion with a lot of people. And when this law came into being back in, I guess it became legal in 2011. So goodness, about 10 years ago already. This was discussed because this is when these products were first being introduced aggressively into the marketplace. They've been around for a while, but roughly 10 years ago, they started getting launched very aggressively into the marketplace. And these stabilized nitrogen materials are good materials. So what I'm going to say is not bashing them, but what you need to know as an end user that disqualifies them as slow release is that it's protecting water soluble forms. It's not slowing down the release. It's trying to prevent certain types of losses from occurring, but it's still quick release material. And the rule makers, the lawmakers that put the law together, when it was explained to them how these products work, they made the decision, and I think rightly so, that these truly are not slowly available nitrogen materials. These products protect urea from volatilizing up into the atmosphere and losing nitrogen that way. That's one stabilizer material. So if you remember from your training, urea is quick release. It's water soluble. So it's not preventing it from dissolving and being taken up by the plant or from being leached. What that stabilizer is doing is preventing urea from volatilizing up into the atmosphere. And that is a real issue with urea, and that's a benefit for using stabilized nitrogen. I have nothing against using the product, but that's not really slowing down its release. It's just preventing a loss up into the atmosphere. And then there's another stabilizing material that is trying to prevent the conversion of ammonia, NH4 in the soil, to nitrate. And nitrate, if you remember your chemistry, is more susceptible to leaching than ammonium is in the soil. Ammonium and nitrate are the mineral forms of nitrogen that plants will take up and use to feed themselves. So they'll take up either one. Some people believe that nitrate is more effective at certain times of the year, but not getting into those details, the plants can take up either ammonium, NH4, or nitrate, which is NO3. Both of them are susceptible to leaching, but nitrate is very susceptible to leaching. And so one of the components in stabilized nitrogen is preventing the conversion when you add a fertilizer and it converts into ammonium. The bacteria in the soil can then continue converting it into nitrate. And that's what one of the components in stabilized nitrogen is stopping, is that conversion to nitrate, to try to prevent excessive nitrate leaching, because nitrate will leach much easier than ammonium will. Ammonium will also leach, so I'm not saying ammonium won't leach, but what's going to leach first is the nitrate, and then once the nitrate's gone, what follows behind it is the ammonium. So that's what's going on with stabilized nitrogen, Mike. And I know it's confusing. It sounds a little complicated, but I think the take-home message for the folks in the webinar tonight is stabilized nitrogen is just stabilizing quick release or water soluble forms of nitrogen. It's not slowing down their availability to the plant. It's just trying to stabilize them and prevent losses from occurring. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And I guess when they're buying a bag of fertilizer, they want to see that the CRN, controlled release nitrogen, derived from statement.
Yep. So the derived from statement, you're also looking on the label for not only CRN, but WIN, or water insoluble nitrogen. CRN and WIN mean you have slow release in the bag. Yep.
Perfect.
And there's some other details as well, but those are the biggies right there, CRN and WIN. Anything else on that, Mike?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Sure. Very good question. So let's talk a little bit about natural organic fertilizers. These are very good fertilizers in their own right. They're getting marketed very aggressively as feeding the soil because you're adding organic matter as well as nutrients with these materials. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But I do want you to understand how that actually works because it's a little bit different than some of our synthetic materials. These are obviously derived from plant or animal products, things like plant meals, corn, soybean, alfalfa, animal meals, animal manures, and even their seabird guano and bat guano or other nitrogen fertilizers. And then we have the biosolids that fall into this class. And these are not always accepted for organic production, but they are called by the fertilizer industry as natural organic materials. But then there's that whole organic production philosophy that's got the same word in it, but it has a slightly different meaning. And technically, that group, that philosophy doesn't agree with the use of biosolids. But we're not going to get into that argument here. I just want to distinguish that as it is a natural organic fertilizer to the manufacturing industry, but it doesn't qualify for organic production. All right, so timing of these is something that you want to understand because they are more temperature dependent than most other nitrogen fertilizers. They need microorganisms to break them down and release, or that breakdown and release is called mineralize the nitrogen and take those large organic compounds and break them down into what I just talked about a few minutes ago, ammonium and nitrate. Essentially, these natural products have to be decomposed by microorganisms into the mineral form before the plants can take them up. And so that mineralization process by microbes is slow in cold weather. In fact, it takes about a soil temperature somewhere above 50 degrees Fahrenheit before you get much mineralization. You will get mineralization under 50 degrees, but it's incredibly slow, and you will feel like you didn't actually fertilize for weeks before you actually start to see something. And so you need to understand that if you're trying to go out in early March and make an application with a natural organic fertilizer and you need green up, you're probably not going to get it from a natural organic, at least not very fast, compared to a water soluble or something like controlled release nitrogen in the form of sulfur coated urea, something like that. On the flip side, when it warms up and you start getting soil temperatures over 80 degrees Fahrenheit, may not even be pushing 90, you can get very fast release from these natural organic products because the breakdown process accelerates under those temperatures. And if you overdo it with a natural organic fertilizer in warm to hot weather, you can get big surge growth responses from that application. So you want to be a little bit cautious about how you use natural organic fertilizers in the warm weather because they can be a lot more responsive than you expect them to be because of the heat. Another thing to think about is, especially with the manure products, all manure-based organic fertilizers have a pretty strong odor to them. Now, the odor has been greatly improved from years ago. They used to be a lot stronger than they are today, but they still have that manure-based odor to them. And what you need to be aware of is that's attractive to adult grubs that are, white grub adults that are flying around, the beetles. They're mating, they're laying their eggs, and they are attracted to things like manure because that's where they go lay their eggs because they recognize that's an organic matter food source for the larvae that form from the eggs that they lay. So in late June, early July, when white grub adults the white grub larvae turn into adult beetles, start flying around and mating, I'd be careful about any natural organic, especially manure-based natural organic fertilizers, because they could serve as an attractant. I've actually seen research plots where comparing natural organic fertilizers to synthetic fertilizers, and the natural organic plots had more grub damage in them because of this factor. They were applied at the time of mating, and the females knew right where to go to lay those eggs. The other thing that I want you to recognize about natural organic sources, they have different release rates depending on what the source is. So as an example, alfalfa meal, soybean meal, if that's in your product, those have a medium release rate. And something like blood meal, which is around 13%, 12% nitrogen, that's fairly rapid. Now, it's not going to be as rapid probably as urea, but it's still a fairly quick releasing source. It's pretty easy for microbes to break down blood meal and get a plant response to that product. Cottonseed meal, on the other hand, is very slow, and you could wait for weeks before you see much of a response. So recognize that there can be different formulations of natural organics that have fairly different release characteristics, some that release rather slow, some that are kind of moderate, and then some that actually can be relatively fast if you're interested in fast release.
Is that why we see a lot of these natural organic products? Fertilizers have a combination of bone meal, blood meal, and say alfalfa meal, so they're hitting all three release points.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head, Mike. That's why they blend these things together so that they give you a more acceptable response, not too rapid, not too slow, kind of just right. Goldilocks and three bears kind of thing. But there will be variation from company to company. But I think over time, since I've been in the business since 1980 as a young buck, and natural organic products were really quite variable back then. You could get some really good ones, but you could get some horrible ones. And I think over the decades, those companies that specialize in this kind of business have done a much better job of figuring out how to put various components together to give you a good release characteristic. So just realize that there can be some variation in that, but it has gotten a lot better. It has gotten a lot better. I do want to touch on corn gluten a little bit. This one's very trendy in the organic circles because it has potential for weed control. And that was discovered in the 1980s by Nick Christians at Iowa State University, where he observed that he could get weed control with corn gluten meal as a fertilizer. It's roughly an 8 to 10% nitrogen product. The price, however, will fluctuate quite wildly with this product. And if corn prices are really high, corn gluten fertilizer is going to be very expensive that year. And you also need to be aware that that product is recommended to be applied at 2 pounds of N per 1,000 square feet, because that's what Nick Christians at Iowa State figured out was the best rate to achieve some level of weed control with the product. Well, unfortunately, if you're using it for weed control, you can't legally apply this product at 2 pounds of N per 1,000. If you remember the rules, we're only allowed to apply 1 pound per 1,000. And so you'll have to do 2 back-to-back applications fairly close together, obviously, to be able to apply this legally in New Jersey. And whether that affects product performance or not is a good question. Um, I'm not sure that it will affect it a lot, but it is something that people do ask, and I don't have a very good answer for it because we haven't studied it that closely. And I will state that this product has weed control properties. It's not a strong weed control. It's not like using dimension or pendimethalin. So you can get some suppression of weeds, but it's not as effective as a synthetic pesticide is. And then I think I'll wrap up with this slide because we're at 8 o'clock, and I don't want to keep you guys too long here. Just realize that if you have a lot of rainfall or you are managing a property where you don't have control of the irrigation and the owner is over irrigating, those are conditions at which nitrogen is going to leach out of your soils, and this is a real problem on sandy soils. So if you have a client, if you have a property that's kind of in this scenario, you have to be really careful with your nitrogen fertilization because you're going to get some leaching happening. And you want to use things like lower rates, slow release products, and try to minimize that problem. And then we talked about this earlier, returning clippings. At least I think we talked about it. This is my third seminar today, so I'm not sure what I've told this group at this point. But if I didn't mention this earlier, I'll just quickly say that if you return clippings in your on your properties, you probably can decrease your fertility budget for nitrogen anyway by about 25%. So if you're fertilizing at 4 pounds and removing clippings, and you decide to return clippings, you could probably cut your program back to 3 pounds and have the same level of turf quality. And Mike, with that, I think I'll end it.
Well, okay, but before you go, and we finish
Okay.
up the last slides, and I'll take it over, I do have some questions from the audience. John Mayer wanted to know, is it true that corn glutamine can suffocate the soil?
That's a new one to me. I haven't heard that before. I would assume that if you over apply it and you apply it like a top dressing, you could get a suffocating kind of condition forming. But the only way I can envision a suffocation problem happening is if it's a drastic over application, where it's essentially out there as a top dressing and it kind of seals off the surface because it gets kind of matted down and um, uh, mushy at the surface. But that's the only way I could see it happening. So you'd have to be drastically over applying the product for that to occur, if I understand the question, Mike.
I guess you do. I actually, I think the only way corn glutamine really will suffocate a lawn is if you leave it in the bag on the lawn and walk away.
Yeah, that would do it too.
So I've got a question from John Petresky. He wanted to know, with foliar applied prilled urea, do you think using a stabilized nitrogen source like UMax is worth the additional cost? In the literature, creeping bentgrass end uptake ranges from 35 to 75% of applied. Well, it's a long question, John.
Yes. So in those extreme conditions that John's referring to, where you lose a tremendous amount of urea to volatilization, that's where the stabilized nitrogen plays a role. So I don't believe I described this when I was talking about it, but the conditions in which you get 30 to 75% nitrogen loss of urea from volatilization are when it's warm to hot and wet and humid. So the stabilized nitrogen materials are not going to be as effective because there isn't that much volatility occurring when it's cool. But if you're making applications when it's warm to hot and humid and wet, and the urea sits on the leaves or the prill sits on a leaf or on the very soil surface, and it starts melting because it's absorbing water, there's also bacteria there that'll help break down that urea. Urease is the enzyme that does it. And if it's at the surface like that, it can just volatilize up into the air. And that's when the stabilized material would help under those extreme conditions. So quite honestly, you probably don't need stabilized nitrogen for all applications during the growing season, but where it would pay dividends is if you're making application when it's hot, humid, sticky out, and you're not going to water in the fertilizer. If you water in the fertilizer, the stabilized nitrogen probably is not necessary because you're getting it down into the soil solution, not sitting up on the surface. The volatility happens at the surface. When it's in the soil, down in the soil solution, the volatility losses are almost essentially eliminated because the breakdown products of the urea react with water, dissolve into the water, and don't volatilize because they're in the water. If that makes sense, I hope.
Makes perfectly good sense. Thank you for that answer, sir.
Yep.
If there's any other questions, just type it into the chat box. If not, we're just gonna, you can still type it in. I'm gonna just move a little bit forward, some more house cleaning. Again, to get your credits for tonight's class, you're going to have to send an email to execdirector@newjerseyturfgrass.org. In the subject, put the speaker name and the date of the webinar, and then in the body of the email, we need your date of birth and your ProFact license. We do have some exciting upcoming events through the NJTA. We're going to be hosting the Fine Field Days on Tuesday, July 27th, and then we're going to have the Sports Field Day, July 28th. They are usually the hottest days of the year, 2 to 3 shirt weather. Has been moved just to make me happy. They put it in the middle of August. I don't like the heat, and it's going to be at Fiddler's Elbow Country Club. So if you get an opportunity, you want to put together a foursome, it's a really great event, and it does benefit Rutgers University. And then we are planning to hold the Turf Expo. I'll tell you, I'm not a big fan of webinars. I've been doing way too many of them. I like that in-person meeting. I think you get a lot more out of those classes when you have a chance to interact with the instructor. So I'm looking forward to it. It is scheduled again at the Borgata Hotel and Casino in Atlantic City, December 7th and 9th. So mark your calendars for these events. With that said, if you're not a member of the New Jersey Turfgrass Association, we want you. But we don't want you only to be members. We're also looking for people who join the Turfgrass Association, maybe to join the committee. We have multiple committees. We have the Virtual Learning Committee, which I am part of. We have social media committees. We have membership committees, and we're all looking for help. So if you have you have some time and you want to give back to your industry, and that's why I do it. I'm giving back to the industry because this is what's put food on the table for me. I saw Bob Windish. Bob Windish has served on the Green Industry Council. He gives back to the industry. You get an opportunity. It's great. It's a great group of people, and we would love to have you. And then I will just close by saying thank you to the sponsors. We really appreciate you coming and helping us out so we can provide this information, these free webinars, and we're looking forward to continuing doing these throughout the year. Dr. Murphy, great job. I really appreciate it. And
Thanks for having me.
yeah, oh, please. Looking forward to seeing you in AC this year.
I'm looking forward to being seen in AC. I love doing these webinars for people, but I really want to shake some hands again one of these days.
Absolutely. So, guys, also the ProFact web user walkthrough, if you click on it and it's in a material box, you can save it from your screen. You'll see ProFact user walkthrough. You click on it, and then you can save it to your documents file on your computer. But if you don't get it there, we will be emailing it out to you after the close of today's meeting. With that said, I've got nothing else to say. Cece, do you want to say anything?
I want to thank everybody for coming. It's been a wonderful evening and hope you got a bunch of stuff out of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you, CC. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much. All
Thank
right.
you.
There are no further questions. We are going to close it off. Have a great evening.
And good night, everybody.
Hey, Doc, we forgot to put in the quizzes.
Well, he's not as rigid as the pesticides.
He's the one who makes the rules, so I'm good with it. We had all the quizzes loaded up. I didn't get to launch at one except ours.
I think he's already gone, right?
I don't blame him. He went back to the office to do this. So do me a favor, Cece. You should see on your screen, just to make sure I've got this right, click on the thing that says under materials, ProFact. Hit the materials button, and it's a plus sign. When you hit it, it should open up, and you
Yep, I
should
see. Yep. And it
click on
allows
it.
me to open or save.
There you go.
I thought when I send the certificates to the people, I would also include it as an attachment.
Yeah. In the future, if we get this stuff early, what happens is that when we send out the emails, it automatically gets sent to all participants. So
You mean before or after?
before, pre, and after, you have a choice.
Cool.
There's box to click, so you know what, we can. It's not bad to send them out information in advance.
True, true. We have people who just love staying on, unless they fell asleep.
Now, there's a possibility they fell asleep. They didn't have to answer any quizzes.
Well, I'm getting all the emails with their information.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yes, it is.
We had such trouble with ours today, getting people emails passed through. A lot of them were getting blocked by our server. And so I was getting texts and emails and questions, and oh my gosh, I can't get in there. And well, that was fun.
That's always the fabulous thing about having so much security on,
Yeah, well, it has to be. It has to be. And
I got an email from Tom Ritchie. He tried 4 times or for over a half an hour to get get on, and he kept getting error messages. So by the time I saw that,
it showed he arrived at one point. And that's the hard part from a technological standpoint. All I know is shut it down, log back in, and
yeah,
we don't block anyone. Anyone can come and go as they want. We had people who got bumped off, and I saw them return. So it does
I'm still going with the 45 minutes in the session cutoff, right?
Yep, I think that's fair.
Because I had a couple that were 13 minutes, 19 minutes, and to me that's not enough to be on the session.
No, that is not enough to do it. I'm dismissing me.
You're dismissing you. So
Yeah, well, I'd sign. Hold on, let me turn on my camera. This is what it looks like on my phone.
Oh, that's cool.
And so when I say people can view it from their phone, they can view it from their phone. And so that's not a bad thing. And
Hi,
so,
Mike.
hey, Cece, how are you?
Good. Toast to you again. You have a very breezy way of your conversation, which is great.
Oh, it's got to be a conversation. Sitting around waiting for webinars to start are difficult. Getting a word in with him with Dr. Murphy in the beginning when it was all the new ProFact information, there was just no place for me to interact. But I think
No, he should have been on. A lot of people don't know who he is. You really need to face the person.
Absolutely. Well, I think he had camera issues, and I don't know why. And so we'll just continue to work through it and figure it out as we go.
So,
What you can do.
you had Karen today, or you're having Karen tomorrow?
No, I had Karen today, and she knocked it out of the park.
Really?
I have never seen Karen present. Never.
How did
And crushed it. She crushed it. She was very a matter of fact. She has a very charming disposition when she speaks. She doesn't talk above people. She's right here where the audience is. She meets them head on, and has some very folksiness to her. And so
That's
that's great. I actually had people that were texting me and saying, "Oh my gosh, what she was talking about. I've got some problems on a property that now I understand why I planted this tree in a southern facing exposure, so the wind was whipping through it, and there was radiant heat, and people are responding to it, so that went very well. So your suggestion of Karen Plumley as a speaker saved my butt.
So now you have a butt? You didn't have one before.
Well, not much. I don't have much of a butt, but we'll take that. The worst part about it is this is
Most men don't. Eddie didn't either.
this is still being recorded. And now
Oh, God, please.
I don't have a butt. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we
So-
don't want to put that on YouTube.
I don't like I care.
That's
I think the world knows me enough. I'm not really worried about not having a butt. I'm Irish. We don't. That's just it's one of our curses. So, I think one of the things that we need to do, that slide, are you a member? And then we got the responses.
I like that. I like the way you did that.
We got to script it out a little bit more, because I would like to have, following that slide is another slide that backs it up and showing you things that the NJTA
Our benefits.
are benefits. So if you could put something together, that'd be great. But also not only our benefits, but why we do it. What we're getting out of it. What do we do to, I put Dr. Murphy on the spot, but we paid for an irrigation system. We put up a pavilion because why?
Right.
We want to support them. And so your dues are not going to, so I can go on vacation. Your dues are going into something to help our industry. And we got to figure a way to, and we're winding down, mind you now, but a way to express that. So I think after we talk about, hey, there's going to be 4 quizzes, here's an example of a quiz. Boom, it gives us that opportunity.
Yeah, I thought that was very good. And by the way, you always say New Jersey turfgrass.org instead of NJ.
Sorry.
I mean,
Sorry.
if people are only hearing it and not seeing it, it may make a difference to them.
Yep. Well, I'll never correct that problem, Cece. So you need to open up your mic and say, no, Mike, it's this. I won't be offended.
I'll have Dundee do it. Fine.
Yeah, that's fine. You say, no, Mike, wrong again. It's and we're good.
Not a problem.
I hear Dundee calling mommy now.
Oh, because I am weaning him from all of his treats that I spoiled him with. And so now he's only got what's in in his dog bowl.
Oh,
He doesn't like that.
Our dogs are spoiled rotten. They get their breakfast cooked for them every day.
Their breakfast what?
Cooked every day.
Oh, really? What do you cook them?
What's ever left over from the night before. I put it in the microwave, and that's what they eat.
Oh.
We make chicken for them. We make pork. We do hamburger, and we just buy it and cook it up. They love it.
Well, do you have a big dog?
I have 3 dogs.
3 big. Okay. Well, I only have one, and I have definitely spoiled him. And he put on 6 pounds in 6 months.
Child's play. I can put on.
COVID, and he can't. I had to shovel the backyard, just enough for him to have a place to use
I
it.
understand.
Bathroom.
I snow blow probably about 2,000 square foot of my lawn, so the dogs have a place to go.
Yeah, well, I don't have a snow blower, so.
Well, I do. You don't want one. They hurt. They hurt. Tom Ritchie has arrived.
Oh, good. Let's see if we can talk to him. Unmute Tom Ritchie.
I'm going to. Tom, can you unmute your microphone? We see you have arrived. Tom?
Hey, Tom Ritchie. Are you there?
I don't know. But
I'm here. I just had to get up back into my office and I had my computer off. I gave up.
Yes, sorry about that.
Thank you, Cece. I just got your message. I turned my computer on. Thank you. But I'm sorry, but I was just frustrated. I tried for about almost 40 minutes and I couldn't get on.
And I'm sorry, I don't check the email while I'm listening all the time.
Of course. I didn't. I was just frustrated and reached out just out of desperation. And I'm sorry about you.
No, that's not a bother.
That's what we're here for. We're here to try to help, but apparently it didn't help very much.
That's okay.
So what did you end up doing? Log off and log on?
I did that repeatedly, and I kept changing my password. It wasn't accepting it, and I don't know why. I mean, even though I reset it each time, I don't know.
All I know is that I kept on seeing you. I would see saying Tom Ritchie has arrived, and then I wouldn't see anything. I saw it twice.
The message I kept getting, Mike, was that I was not the host, and the session host has not arrived and opened the meeting yet. That's what I got. That's the message I kept getting.
It might have been the wrong link. Because
then I thought, maybe I've got the wrong day.
No,
So I don't know.
There should have been a link emailed to you an hour before the class started.
And that's exactly what I used.
Yeah, I don't know why you were having technical difficulties. I'm sorry. I wish I could figure it out, but I can't.
That's okay. We can only go forward.
You need to roll back credits?
I don't, I'm okay with credits. I was more interested in hopefully learning something.
Yeah.
Now, Diane Elwood just came on.
Hello, Diane. Why don't you unmute your microphone? How are you this evening? No, now, Cece, did you just see that triangular yield sign?
Yeah, what does that mean?
That means they're looking at another screen. So people have multiple screens, like I have 2 screens on my computer. It means they're playing the class in the background, and that's not always the case. And they're shopping on Amazon on another screen.
Oh, so that's what that means. She's looking at another screen.
I don't know, Diane, can you hear us? And she just dropped off.
So the hand raised is if you have a question. The other thing means another screen. The computer screen means what? You're looking. What does that second one mean?
The second one?
The camera.
Camera? That's if you're the presenter. The second that you can't see behind it is a screen which says that's the presenter.
Okay.
It looks like you
What does the little pointer mean?
That little pointer right there?
No, the one that's next to your name under the list of attendees. There's the microphone.
It's a drop-down box that allows me to take back control of the class.
It's red now?
I don't know what it is now because I can't.
Well, I'm looking in the attendees box.
Oh, hold on. Attendees box. Oh, it lets you pick colors. I don't know. I've never used it. Hey, listen, I got the pointer over here. Let's be me I got that advanced.
I noticed that you did do that. Yes.
And I guess that's telling you that I have my pointer.
Maybe that's what it is. I'm so happy you have the pointer.
I was after I saw Dr. Murphy pull out the pointer, I said, I'm pulling out a pointer. I can't be Tom Ritchie. I can't be outdone.
Where is your pointer?
On the bottom of the PowerPoint, right here, you can't see it right now, but there are the boxes to advance it, but then there's a button that you can push that gives you access to a pointer. It also gives you access to a magnifying glass.
Cool.
Turn that off.
Diana would just send me her information.
So I got, this is some cool stuff that I can do that I will never use. And then just pop a button back and it goes back. So
When we set up new things, we're going to switch to the go-to training, right? Or go-to meeting? Or go-to something.
I think so, because you'll be able to host more people. And I'm looking at big picture, that if we want to have more than 200, if there's something going on, like if we decide that there's going to be in person Atlantic City, but also, hey, let's broadcast this out to people who couldn't make it in Ohio and Washington State.
I agree.
That gives us that capability.
And it's less expensive, so the Turfgrass can probably take it back on if they wanted to.
I don't know, but also the other thing is, it allows me to have all the presenters lined up, and it's all in one screen. It functions a little bit better. This one would be a good system if you wanted to do breakout rooms. We don't do breakout rooms where we would send people out and then they would come back in. So
where are they?
They're somewhere on the screen. I have no idea.
Oh.
I have never done it before. So audio timer dashboard. Let's see.
Somebody said I was wondering about the quizzes.
Whoops. Oh, listen. It's class. Activity. Choose an activity. Play a video. No. Materials, polls. Yeah, I don't know where the breakout rooms are. So
I don't think we need to worry about it.
It doesn't even matter.
Will Tom Ritchie get that file?
He should. We should all be getting it. If I'm not mistaken. Hold on. Let's see. End the show. We should have it right here. When we go into ProFact and we open it up, right now I've loaded into it the materials. And so if I click on edit here, it tells us add material. We already did. Go back to my trainings. ProFact. I wonder if I can't see because we're in session.
Catalog, a library?
No, right here before. Can you see it right now? It says before training or during training. ProFact.
I can see that now, yes.
And so it sends, you have a choice in here. Edit again. Close that. And so I think, not positive, no description, we're just going to save it. Wonder if it's in settings. Download it, no. Settings. Upon registration.
After the training, there it is.
There you go. So they could see it during the training session and then after. So hopefully I didn't foobar and it gets sent, but I will know.
Yes. So do you have any more tonight or tomorrow? Or you get a break?
I have a business one tomorrow, but not a training session. So I'll be fine. I'm done. I'm tired. I'm done.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay. Well, then I will let you go. And Tom, it was great to hear your voice. I'm sorry we missed you.
Well, I've tried, but I thank you very much. And, are you ever going to show these again, even without credits? I mean, so we could possibly, someone could
We
view
are.
the
We have
session?
we have set up a YouTube channel. We are going to just go through each of the recordings and take out anything extraneous, let the speaker approve it, and then we're going to post them. So
Okay,
that could
that's
take a
great.
couple weeks. But we
That's
do plan.
great. Okay.
Perfect. Yep. Tom, have a great evening. Cece, have a
You too. Great to
You-
see you guys and hear you. And I'm glad we finally I got to connect, but thank you.
Thanks,
goodness.
Mike.
Stay well.
Stay well, everyone.
Okay, have fun.
Bye-bye. Got so
Sure.
over to you.